There we go. Now we're recording. For Wahlberg, it was largely because of his desire to be a positive role model for his children. He didn't want them assuming that because he has been successful without completing high school, they should expect the same. I can't tell my kids to go to school if I don't have a diploma, he said when he successfully earned his GED certificate in 2013. And we see that a lot. A lot of child actors and things don't finish high school; they complete it later, or they complete it through a GED program. So, career highlights: born June 5th, 1971, in Boston. Began recording in the early 1990s. Enjoyed acclaim and success. Produces television series like Boardwalk Empire. Active in youth service programs through his Mark Wahlberg Youth Foundation, dedicated and passionate parent, and apparently owns car dealerships in the Columbus area. That's another one of his success stories, I suppose. It's where I mostly encounter him now is in TV commercials. So thinking about Unit 2, so argument, analysis, and text comparison. So it's going to be a lot more reading comprehension, but furthering our skills here. So it says in Unit 2, you will take the skills that you learned in Unit 1 and apply them to persuasive tests and paired passages. So now we're looking at a little more specific types of readings. It was very broad in Unit 1. In lessons 1 through 8, you will practice reading and evaluating persuasive text. You will learn how writers try to convince readers to accept their arguments by presenting facts and evidence, employing emotional appeals, using logic, and providing examples from personal experience. Understanding what makes an effective persuasive text is important to your success as a writer and a reader. In lessons 9 through 13, you will compare how different authors and different types of text explore similar subjects. You will learn about the importance of such issues as perspective, writer's purpose, structure, emphasis, and audience. Practicing reading and analyzing a range of paired passages will prepare you for the text comparisons you will be asked to make on the GED Reasoning Through Language Arts test. So that's really what it's coming down to here too, especially when when it's saying pairing passages. So we'll have one passage where it's like this, author believes this, and then a secondary passage will be like this author believes this. And that's going to be important because you'll have a writing response that's based on that type of idea, where you have to who had the more convincing argument, writer A or writer B, and then you have to write a response to that and why. So this is getting a little more specific preparation for that by looking at these ideas here. So let's move on. And then for today, what we're going to look at first in Unit 2 is determine author's purpose. So what do we do for that? We're going to, by the end, complete this lesson. We will determine an author's purpose and then identify an author's audience. Those things go hand in hand very often. So let's take a look at our audio.
Authors write for different purposes or reasons: to describe, inform, persuade, entertain, or tell a story. In fact, authors often write for more than one purpose. For example, in a persuasive article encouraging regular exercise, an author may tell a funny story about trying to keep up in an aerobics class. The main purpose of this article may be to persuade, but the author does so by entertaining. Sometimes authors directly state their purpose. Other times, they have implicit or unstated purposes. Authors always keep their readers or audience in mind. Audiences may be general, anyone who chooses to read the work, or they may be specific according to age, political view, income, education, technical background, interest, or profession. Authors try to appeal to their audiences and use appropriate language.
So, it's funny because I think we've encountered this more in social studies so far than we have in language arts. And I've asked about this we've had a few questions related to this, as far as the purpose of somebody's writing. Why are they writing? Identifying an audience will help you understand that, and vice versa. So, they go hand in hand. And there's a ton of different ways a writer writes. For what purpose? To tell a story, oftentimes is also to entertain, right? To inform. Your ultimate goal may be to persuade somebody to do something. If you're, like it says here, talking about like a health and fitness website or something, they may give you statistics about, the relationship between obesity and heart disease in order to persuade you to exercise more, right? As being their overall goal, but they're giving you awareness too. And typically there is an audience in mind. A good writer is going to sit down and think about, who am I writing this for? We don't just sit down and say, okay, well, I'm going to write. And it's, there are general audience, right? There, a lot of news articles, things like that are for a wide general audience, but you tend to, in any other specific situation, for instance, when it came to exercise, if it's for, a like novice people who are starting to work out, or novice fitness and weightlifters, things like that, you're going to use more general terms. You're going to explain things. If it's for advanced, if I was writing for like a bodybuilding magazine, I have a more specific audience in mind. I might use more technical terms. I might skip over having to explain everything, because I have an understanding that my audience will already know these terms. That's one way. And also, as far as, the audience goes, if you're thinking of persuading them or something, they may have a particular mindset that you're already aware of. So that all comes into play in how you write. So let's take a look here. And like I said, we're going to look at more sort of nonfiction writing here in this unit. So getting a flu shot, also something that's very relevant for this time of year, and all kinds of other vaccines too. I had my COVID booster on Sunday, my Pfizer shot. So getting a flu shot often protects you from coming down with the flu. And although the flu shot doesn't always provide total protection, it's worth getting. So right away, right, we look at this paragraph 1. Although the flu shot doesn't always provide total protection, it's worth getting. So this sounds like they're trying to convince us, right? Persuade us about something. This year's annual flu shot will offer protection against H1N1 flu, which is the swine flu virus, in addition to 2 other influenza viruses that are expected to be in circulation this fall and winter. Influenza is a respiratory infection that can cause serious complications, particularly to young children and to older adults. Flu shots are the most effective way to prevent influenza and its complications. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention now recommends that everyone 6 months of age or older be vaccinated annually against influenza. That is from the MayoClinic.com article, Flu Shot, your best bet for avoiding influenza. So that's something, we always want, if we have that information available, as far as where did the information come from? The Mayo Clinic, right? That is a huge medical research facility and hospital center. So that's reliable information. Text box A, it's asking us, or it's saying, the author's stated purpose often appears early in a passage. The authors of this passage want to persuade readers to get a flu shot. This sentence makes the claim that the flu shot is worth getting, right? Actually, it's the next one. It's not that one underlined. It's the next one where it says it's worth getting. But getting a flu shot often protects you from coming down with the flu. That's information, right? That's bringing awareness. But then in the next line, it says the flu shot doesn't always provide protection, but it's worth getting. Right there is what it's trying to, wants you to get the flu shot. And then secondly, the CDC is a government agency that studies and advises about health issues. Authors refer to reliable sources to make their arguments more persuasive. You know, thinking about when we evaluated sources of information, right? If you were to write a paper, you know, on influenza, the CDC would be somewhere you would want to go. They are experts on it. Where you get your information from is really important, especially when it comes to you know, science and things like that. Go to where the best information is available. That's going to be someplace like the CDC. Okay, so let's take a look at the quiz. So Unit 2, Lesson 1, getting our flu shot. And it says here in our text box, making assumptions. Knowing an author's reputation may give you information about the purpose of the passage. The Mayo Clinic is a respected medical facility. You can assume that staff members are reliable sources of medical information. Just like we mentioned before, you know, knowing something about the author, you know, that lends to its credibility. Doesn't mean they don't make mistakes, right? It doesn't mean that sometimes the information isn't good, but it's going to be very reliable. And it's certainly more reliable than something, you know, that you randomly find on the internet. Something from the Mayo Clinic, something from the CDC, that means the information is worth checking out. And even if you don't feel comfortable with it, then you can start checking with other sources. You go to other similar places to see what they say. The NIH, you know, as far as like another organization that deals with like health and safety and things like that. Other reputable like research universities that have like large med schools, OSU, for example. You know, you can look at Ohio, some of the stuff published by Ohio State, or you know, like Cedars-Sinai. You know, these other medical facilities with well-known reputations to get your information. So, number 1. How about Christiana? Did you read number 1 for us?
All right, thank you. Okay, number 1. Which statement? Okay, thank you. Which statement best support the purpose of persuading readers to get a flu shot? A. Okay, A. The flu shot does not always provide total protection. B. The flu shot will offer protection against H1N1 flu, swine flu virus. C. Influenza is a respiratory infection. D. Flu shots are the most effective ways to prevent influenza. D.
D, right? Yeah, the best, which statement best supports the purpose of persuading readers to get a flu shot? D. Flu shots are the most effective way to prevent it. So 1 is D as in dog. And 2, we have a whole lot of reading here. Let's go, Grace. How about 1 through 3 there? Paragraphs 1 through 3.
Okay. The impact of education on poverty. For decades, America has wrestled with poverty, but with little success. In 1964, President Lyndon Johnson famously declared war on poverty. A 2012 study by the Cato Institute estimates that the United States has spent roughly $15 trillion since then, and yet the poverty rate is close to where it was than 40 years ago. Cato reports that the United States spends nearly $1 trillion a year between federal and state programs to fight poverty. That amounts to more than $20,000 per poor person and more than $60,000 for a family of 3. And yet the problem has not improved. Both libraries and conservatives recognize this reality. However, some of the left think the problem is that the government has not gone far enough. They call for more government intervention, like living wages and expanded social services. Granted, the government has a role in aiding the poor, particularly the disabled, handicapped, and those who are poor, largely at no fault of their own.
Okay, Grace, you want to read the last three?
Grace,
Oh, wait.
I should continue. You mean I should continue?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. But if history is any indicator, government transactions and services don't seem to be the key drivers of upward mobility. In fact, they can have the opposite effect and insulate lower classes from upward mobility. Instead, conservatives will argue that education and success and the all-important mediating institutions, families, churches, communities, private and philanthropic enterprises, associations of coaches, teachers, parents, doctors, civil servants, and religious and non-religious volunteers are the pillars of upward mobility. Mobility. The evidence seems to support that. In a landmark study, the Brookings Institution found that young adults who finish high school get a full-time job and wait until age 21 to get married and have children have just a 2% chance of falling into poverty and a 74% of chance ending up in the middle class. From the CNN.com article, Reduce Poverty by Promoting Schools, Families by William J. Bennett in 2013.
Go ahead and read the question there.
What is the author's main purpose in writing this passage? A, to persuade readers to support expanded social services. B, to inform readers about how much the US government spends to fight poverty. C, to inform readers about high school graduation rates. And D, to persuade readers that education is a key factor in overcoming poverty. Is it B?
It's D.
D.
Yeah,
D.
persuading
Yeah.
readers that education is key factor, which is what he ends with right there in paragraph 6. Now, something overall, more so when you're just reading and you're consuming information, and this will apply to to like the GED test as well. But we talked about the Cato Institute before. Remember, I said this was like a libertarian think tank that really pushed small government and states' rights and things like that. Libertarian, and so it does flavor a little bit, right? They're going to push for less spending and maybe more emphasis on education. And then the Brookings Institute, oddly enough, that's kind of a more left-leaning think tank. What I find interesting about this, though, those two things are not exclusive. Up here he's talking about, well, spending, so much per family in different types of related to poverty. Well, education is a big point of that, but that doesn't mean that you don't, that you're not relying on that to help people get through school. How else do you help get people through school? You have to spend money on them. So it's kind of weird that he's saying, well, education is the way out. But if that's the way out, don't you also need to spend money on the people so they can get the education? That's kind of me thinking, outside of what's here. And that would be my response to that. It's like, well, okay, yeah, education is really important, but who's going to pay for it? And how do you get them the education unless you're actually fighting poverty at the same time? So anyway, 2 is D as in dog. And then 3, Sasha Gay, how about reading number 3 for us?
It says, which statement best explains the author's view about social services and other government programs that aid the poor? A, government programs are not the solution to fighting poverty. B, government programs should be expanded until poverty is largely eliminated. C, graduation rates improve when social services are available. And D, the government should not spend any more money on social services. A,
A. Yeah, government programs are not the solution to fighting poverty. And, you know, like I said, when you get used to seeing stuff like when it says the Cato Institute, I could tell you right there when I saw the Cato Institute, this is probably about small government and eliminating federal money, you know, just by knowing the source. The Brookings Institute, on the other hand, would probably favor, you know, more federal spending. So if this was an article by the Brookings Institution, you might see something about, you know, we need more resources in, you know, this sector of the government or in this sector of society. So yeah, A, government programs are not the solution to fighting poverty for number 3. Okay, and again, number 4 is the same passage. Christiana, would you like to read number 4?
All right, number 4. The question says the author assumes that this audience will include librarians, laborers, is it?
Yeah, liberals.
Laborers as well as conservatives. Conservatives. Okay. Which statement best supports his assumption? A, he says that both laborers and conservatives agree about reality. B, he provides facts about the amount of money spent on fighting poverty. C, he presents the liberals' viewpoint and encounters
Conservative, conservative, is that where you were at?
He presents the liberals' viewpoint and that word is confusing. Counters it with the conservatives one. D, he mentioned historical viewpoints other than those of laborers and conservatives. D.
C, he presents the liberal viewpoint and counters it with conservative ones. So this idea that, you know, in 1964, the war on poverty, he's pointing that out as liberal policies. So to some degree, you know, it helps to understand, you know, when we're talking about certain presidencies. So LBJ, Lyndon Johnson, was known as a you know, who's a Democrat and was a, you know, a liberal, much more liberal president, which meant more towards you know, typically more federal spending, more emphasis on social issues, you know, sort of expanded role of federal government. Typically that's a liberal idea. Conservatives, you know, when it says right wing or conservative, it tends to be, you know, in theory, and again, you know, it doesn't always hold true, but smaller federal government, promotes states' rights, less emphasis on social issues. You know, they want local governments to sort things out, things like that. So C for number 4. And is C for our last one. We got the same passage. Grace, you want to read number 6?
Okay. How does paragraph 6 relate to the author's purpose? A, it explains the details of the Brookings Institution study. B, it supports the author's viewpoint stated in paragraph 5. C, it confirms the findings of the Cato Institute's study mentioned in paragraph 1. And D, it contradicts the figures the author presents in paragraph 2. B.
B, yeah. So he says in 5, it said conservatives would argue that education earns success in the all-important mediating institutions, families, churches, communities, private and philanthropic enterprises, associations of coaches, teachers, parents, doctors, yada, 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 are the pillars of upward mobility. So he's making that point. Would argue, right there at the top, education is a pillar of upward mobility. He uses paragraph 6. The evidence seems to support that. In a landmark study, the Brookings Institution found, talking about young adults and the completion of high school. Again, I see that as, the two bookends, the problem being poverty and the solution being education. And he's pointing to the statistic about completing high school. That's great. How do you get there? That's my thing. And I feel like there's something missing in his overall argument. If I was to, rebuttal, if I was to respond to this, I would have some statistics about, okay, well, who completes high school then? What is their poverty level as they're going through high school? I would have some other facts to bring up, but it is basically outlining here what evidence does he use. He's using this study to show that education matters. So 5 is B as in boy. Okay, and that is it for the quiz. Okay, anybody need any of the answers there? Everybody's caught up. All right, so let's move on to the workbook. Okay, and again, identifying the intended audience of a passage can help you understand the author's purpose and identify important information in a passage. An author writing to inform a general audience, for example, as was mentioned before, will include enough information for anyone to understand the topic. When writing specifically to persuade a particular group to do something or to think in a certain way, a writer might include details that would be especially persuasive to people in that group, right? You get more specific. You don't have to worry about defining, more general terms. You can really, dig into more specific details. So here we go with the workbook. So answers to common questions about the flu shot. So again, this is from what we read before from the mayoclinic.com about the flu shot and your best bet for avoiding influenza from 2013. And the question it's stating here, so you imagine, when you see like Q&A on a website, it says, when is the flu vaccine available? Because the flu vaccine is produced by private manufacturers, its availability depends on when production is completed. For the 2012-2013 flu season, manufacturers have indicated shipments are likely to begin in August and continue throughout September and October until all vaccine is distributed. Doctors and nurses are encouraged to begin vaccinating their patients as soon as flu vaccine is available in their areas. Why do I need to get vaccinated every year? New flu vaccines are released every year to keep up with rapidly adapting flu viruses. Because flu viruses evolve so quickly, last year's vaccine may not protect you from this year's virus. After vaccination, your immune system produces antibodies that will protect you from the vaccine viruses. In general, though, antibody levels start to decline over time, and another reason to get a flu shot every year. And it says here, pointing to the title, the phrase common questions gives you a clue to the intended audience of this passage. The authors are likely writing for a general audience. If they are answering common questions, the information should be fairly easy to understand. So there's your tip off, right? Common questions. So if it said specific questions, it may be for a bit of a different audience. They might be writing for medical professionals, or, like a smaller group within that general audience. So, maybe like age related, something like that. And secondly, the format of the passage gives you clues to the author's purpose. The passage is a series of questions and answers because the authors are answering questions their purpose is likely to inform. So that tells you a lot, right? If they're asking, if they're sort of generating questions that they believe that their audience is going to have, that tells you a lot. In this case, we know it's for a general audience. The types of questions that they're answering, also tells you about that and why they're answering them. So it's to inform. It's also to persuade people to get the flu shot annually. Okay, so here's our workbook. And again, our test taking tips. So it says you may need to use prior knowledge to make an inference and answer a question. For example, in question 1, think about what you know about doctors and how they might differ from a general audience. And question 1, how about Sasha Gay? Could you read question 1 for us?
What do you think? How might the passage differ if doctors were the targeted audience? A, it might include more advanced medical vocabulary. B, it might tell a funny story about someone afraid of getting shot. C, it might inform readers what to expect when getting a flu shot. And D, it might answer a question about the cost of the flu shot. A, is it A?
It is A, yeah. It might include more advanced medical vocabulary, right? If you're talking to a specific audience, you get more technical. So A for number 1. And then
Here.
for 2, how about Christiana? Could you read 2 for us?
Okay. Number 2 says which detail shows that the author's purpose is also to persuade. A, the flu vaccine is produced by private manufacturers. B, shipments of the vaccine are likely to begin in August. C, people should get the vaccine as soon as it is available. D, a flu shot will help increase antibody level that decline over time. D?
D, yeah. And that's your tip off in a question like that, right? Which detail? So we're talking about something more specific, a detail. Some of this other stuff here is very general. People should get the vaccine as soon as it is available. That's general. That's not a detail, right? That's not information. It's not a fact. Shipments of the vaccine are likely to begin in August. Yeah, that is kind of a detail, but it's not necessarily goes with the author's purpose of persuasion, right? And a detail like how a flu shot works, what it does, is going to help persuade people to get it. 2 is D as in dog. Okay, and then new passage. Grace, how about reading paragraphs 1 and 2? And I'm going to actually keep track this time. So just read 1 and 2 for me.
Okay. General J.B. Hood, commanding Army of Tennis, Confederate Army. I have the honor to acknowledge the receipt of your letter of this date, consenting to the arrangements I had proposed to facilitate the removal south of the people of Atlanta who prefer to go in that direction. I enclosed a copy of my orders, which will, I am satisfied, accomplish my purpose perfectly. You start the measures proposed, unprecedented, and appeal to the dark history of war for a parallel as an act of studied and ingenious cruelty. It is not unprecedented for General Johnson himself very wisely and properly remove families all the way from Dalton Town. And I see no reason why Atlanta should be accepted, nor is it necessary to appeal to the dark history of war when recent and modern examples are so handy. You yourself burn downing houses along your parapets. And I have seen today 50 houses that have been rendered uninhabitable because they stood in the way of your fort and men. You defended Atlanta on a line too close to town that every cannon shot and many musket shot for our line of investments that overshot their mark, went into the habitations of women and children. General Hardy did the same at Jonesboro. The General Johnson did the same last summer at Jackson, Mississippi. I have not accused you of heartless cruelty, but merely instance these cases of very recent occurrence and could go on and enumerate hundreds of others and challenge any fair man to judge him and to judge which of us has the heart of pity for the families of a brave people.
Okay. I'll just read the last one. If we must be enemies, let us be men, and fight it out as we propose to do, and not deal in such hypocritical appeals to God and humanity. God will judge us in due time, and he will pronounce whether it be more humane to fight with a town full of women and the families of a brave people at our back, or to remove them in time to places of safety among their own friends and people. I am, very respectably, your obedient servant. And that's from William T. Sherman. So, with the letter, we know who the audience is, right? It's probably going to be a specific person. So here, General Sherman from the Union Army, right? It says Military Division of the Mississippi in the field, Atlanta, Georgia, commanding the Union Army. And then General Hood, who's in Atlanta, is the commander of the Army of Tennessee, which is part of the Confederate Army. So, and outlining the removal, I think this might be from the same letter we saw way back when about the removal of people from Atlanta before the Union Army begins their attack. And Sherman is basically talking about, getting called out for some of his brutal methods. And he's pointing out to General Hood how, there's been a lot of instances where the Confederates have put civilians in harm's way themselves. So they don't have a lot of ground to stand on as far as their treatment and sort of what he says, the dark history of war, right? The very uncivilized characteristics of war here. So, according to the passage, we got a blank here. According to the passage, General Sherman commanded which army?
Is it Union?
Said the Union.
Yeah. Not the Funyun Army up at FBNI. The Union Army. UNION. The Funyun Army. Okay. And then General Hood commanded the
What's so funny? Confederate.
Confederate. Yeah. Union Army. And General Hood commanded the Confederate Army. And then secondly,
so funny.
we have to think of what is the implicit and explicit ideas here, right? So the blank purpose of the letter to confirm the plans for evacuating Atlanta. So evacuating Atlanta, is that the implicit or explicit idea here?
Explicit.
That is the explicit goal in the letter. Okay. That is why he's writing. That's what he leads off with, right? The removal south of the people of Atlanta. Explicit. Okay, so that's number 4 is explicit. Number 5, then, the blank purpose is to justify the invasion of Atlanta. So that's implicit, right? So he gets into details about, the dark history of war and this implication of what the occupation of Atlanta will be and the invasion of Atlanta. So implicit for number 5. Number 6, based on the information in paragraph 2, has General Hood accused General Sherman of cruelty, pity, or bravery?
Pity.
Which one was that?
Pity.
Actually,
Yeah, is it pity? Pity?
cruelty. So,
Yeah.
General, this is information that we don't have. Apparently, there's been some communication from General Hood to General Sherman, and when he's talking about the dark history of war, it appears that General Hood has accused him of some type of cruelty. It's something I've mentioned a couple times about the difference between the Confederate Army and the Union Army. The Union Army, for understood that war was horrible, but they were willing to do things that the Confederacy was not to win the war. And so General Sherman, he basically burned his way to the coast through Georgia. So when he took Atlanta, he burned part of Atlanta. He burned part of Savannah and Charleston, South Carolina, because he knew that was one way to, by destroying the morale of the Confederate people, they were going to win. And Confederates had but more of a romantic idea, at least in theory. And that's what Sherman is pointing out here, though. It's like, you have this sort of high-minded idea of war, but you've also done things to put, citizens and peaceful people in harm's way. So you're really not any better if you're going to accuse me of cruelty. So cruelty there for number 6. And number 7, we have a new passage. So Sasha Gay, how about reading 1 and 2, paragraph 1 and 2 for us?
The American need for more. Many of us find that we seem to require more necessities than we can get the money to pay for. Our friends with more money are constantly showing how indispensably convenient. Sorry. Sorry, our friends with more money are constantly showing how indispensably convenient these necessities are, and we keep buying them until we either outspend our incomes or miss the higher concern of life. The saddest part of all is that it is in great measure an American development, and we Americans keep inventing new necessities. Of course, it all belongs to progress, and no one is quite willing to have it stop. Take houses, for example. An ideal of earthly comfort is to get a house so big that it is burdensome to maintain, and fill it up so full of extras that it is a constant occupation to keep it in order. However, when nature provides a house, that house fits the occupant. Animals which build my instincts build only what they need. But man's building instincts is boundless. Nature never tells him when nature never tells him when he has finished. And perhaps it should not surprise us that in so many cases he does not know. He just goes ahead as long as the materials last.
Christiane, you want to read the last paragraph there?
Okay. Paragraph 3 said, if another man tries to oppress him, he understands his kind of. This was that way they try.
Tyranny.
Okay, tried. He is ready to fight and sacrifice all he has, rather than submit to it. But the tried of things is so subtle.
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 Yeah.
So gradually in its approach and comes so marked with seeming benefits that it has him hopelessly bound before he suspects. He says, I will add plus to my house. I will have one or two more horses. I will make a little greenhouse in my garden. And also he goes on having things and imagining that he is richer for owning them. It is only over time that he begins to realize that it is the things that own him.
Okay.
That's from the time of things.
Okay. You want to read the question for us too?
Okay. The question says, what is the artist's main purpose? A, to tell a story about expanding house, to inform readers about animals in to inform readers about animal instance. Is this preserve that word? The B, to inform readers about animals
Instincts.
Okay, instincts. C, to persuade reader to think about their real needs. D, to describe newest convenience for the home. Is it C?
Yeah. Persuade readers to think about their real needs. And it's funny, this was written in 1893, but I think it really speaks to us today. The tyranny, if something is tyrannical, it's oppressive, it has authority over you, right? We see tyranny as the opposite of democracy. That's often the way it's painted. And here it's the tyranny of things, your possessions having authority over you, and tyranny, and that we tend to just continue to, as humans, in the natural world, either a animal either builds a habitat to its size, or it only grows to the size of its habitat. But we just continue to expand. We want bigger houses, we want bigger cars, and we're going to fill them with things. But then those things kind of take possession. Our possessions take possession of us because we let them dictate our lives. And that's kind of what he's going for here. So 7 is C. 8, how about Grace? You want to read 8 for us?
Okay. How does contrasting the tyranny of things with oppression of another person, paragraph 3, advance the artist's purpose? The contrast shows that A, people are unaware of the way things come to rule them. B, People refuse what they want with what they need. C, oppression by a ruler is much more common. And D, humans often destroy themselves needlessly or unknowingly. Is it A or
Yeah,
D?
it's A. Really good. Yeah, so this happens, and that's the thing, trying to sort of contrast it. We allow this to happen, where our possessions take possession of us, rather than it's much more obvious when we have a tyrannical leader. So that's what he's pointing out there with number 8. Okay, and number 9, Sasha Gay, you want to read number 9?
How might a reader respond if he or she finds the author's argument convincing? A, the reader might try to live without material possessions. B, the reader might seek to overthrow the government. C, the reader might buy fewer luxury and convenience items. And D, the reader might try to study and learn from nature. C.
Yep.
Is it C?
C? Yeah, C is in cat there, number 9. Yeah, so that's sort of part of his argument there. That's what he's trying to persuade the reader, is that maybe they'll contemplate, do I need this item? Do I need a luxury good like this? That's what he's wanting people to do, is question their needs there. So 9 is C, and then Christiana, you want to read 10?
Okay. How does the structure of the last 2 sentences emphasize a key idea of the passage? A, the last sentence summarizes the quotations in the sentence before to emphasize that people do not have good instincts. Okay, B, the last sentence reverses the wording of the sentence before to emphasize that possessions can limit a person's freedom. C, the last sentence paragraph phrase. What's that? Yeah, I'm the paragraph phrase or like the C.
Paraphrase.
Okay, paraphrase. Okay. Paraphrase the sentence before to emphasize that people are quick to respond to trade news. D, the last sentence add details to the sentence before to emphasize that people want to live lifestyles they cannot afford. D?
It's B. Yeah, 10 is B. This last sentence reverses the wording of the sentence before to emphasize the passage. So sometimes, I do that a lot. It's just trying to think about a different way you could say the same thing to help, make a point. It's just one of the things we can do to help people understand. So if you look there, it says, he says, I will add thus to my house. I will have 1 or 2 more horses. I will make a little greenhouse in my garden. And so he goes on having things and imagining that he is richer for owning them, right? So that's the whole idea there. It's like, I am adding more to my house. So this next sentence, it says, it is only over time that he begins to realize that it's his things that own him. Basically, that's what it's going for there. So 10... B as in boy. Oh, and then we got fun home tax deduction. Who doesn't like reading about taxes? So let's see here. Grace, how about taking maybe 1 through 4?
Okay. The Home Office tax reduction. As part of ongoing efforts by the administration to reduce paperwork burdens, the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, announced today that it is providing a new, simpler option for calculating the home office tax reduction, allowing small business owners and employees who work from home and who maintain a qualifying home office to deduct up to $1,500 per year. The IRS also expects taxpayers to save more than 1.6 million hours per year in tax preparation time from this simpler calculation method. The new option allows qualified taxpayers to deduct annually $5 per square foot of home office space on up to 300 square feet for as much as $1,500 in deductions. To take advantage of the new option, taxpayers will complete a much simpler version of the current 43-line form. The announcement builds on the President's commitment to streamline and simplify the tax code for small businesses and to reduce the burden for tax compliance. It is part of broader efforts to make interacting with the federal government easier and more efficient for businesses of all sizes.
Okay, and Saskia, you want to read paragraph 5?
These new rules help our tax code better reflect the needs of America's 21st century workforce and especially small businesses, which play a vital role in our economy. Today, more than half of all working Americans own or work for a small business. An estimated 52% of small businesses are home-based, and many of these small businesses have home office space that would qualify for the deduction. And as technology improves, more businesses, large and small, are going virtual and recruiting employees from across the country, many of whom work from home offices. From the Treasury.gov article, the Home Office Tax Deduction, Simplifying Rules and Helping Small Business Owners Succeed, by Neil Walling and Karen G. Mills.
We'll go ahead
Assessed
and read-
2013.
Great. We'll go ahead and read the question for us, number 11.
What is the explicit purpose of the IRS announcement? A, to inform readers about the new home office tax deduction. B, to persuade taxpayers to take the home office deduction. C, to describe the size and layout of a home office. D, to persuade taxpayers to work from home. A or B?
Hey, yeah, it's largely to inform readers about new home office tax deduction, right? It kind of goes through some of the details there, how that's going to change. And it's from the treasury.gov, right? So that's Department of the Treasury, a reliable source of information, particularly when it comes to, new tax rules and things like that, because that is their business. And 12, how about Christiana? You want to read number 12? So that was the explicit statement, right? To explicitly state the purpose is to inform. So
Okay, number 12. What is the implicit purpose of the passage? A, to inform readers about which tax forms to file. B, to persuade readers to support the current administration. C, to explain proposed change to the tax code. D, to tell a story about a successful home-based business. This C or D?
it's B. So explicitly, right, they're telling you that they're to inform you about a tax program or a change in tax law. Implicitly, right, they're not stating this, but what they want you to do in informing you of this is to persuade the readers to support the current administration. Considering where the information is coming from the treasury.gov. So that's the implicit purpose. Explicitly, they're giving you information. Implicitly, they're persuading you to support it. So 12 is B as in boy. Grace, how about number 13?
Okay. Okay. Which piece of evidence best supports the claim that small businesses play a vital role in our economy? A, the government is trying to simplify the tax code for small business. B, owners of small businesses could deduct up to $1,500 per year. C, more than half of all working Americans own or work for a small business. And D, an estimated 52% of small businesses are home-based. C.
C, yeah. Why is small business important? Play a vital role in our economy. The evidence that they use here is that more than half of all working Americans own or work for a small business. So 13 is C. That's how they're going to convince you that this is important. And then 14, let's see, Sasha Gay, how about 14?
If the audience were limited only to owners of home businesses, which additional detail or information might the passage include? A, an explanation of how the IRS determined the new calculation method. B, an estimate of how many people failed to claim the old deduction. C, a tax form showing a sample calculation of the deduction. And D, an address to which taxpayers can send comments about the tax code. A.
So it's C, tax form showing an explanation of how the IRS determined the new calculation method. That might be relevant for, like accountants or, other government entities. But, if this was just the owners of home business, they would probably be interested in wanting, they would want to know, well, how am I going to calculate this? How is this going to affect me? So with that specific information in mind, they would want, something a little more about, how it's going to look for them on a tax form. So C for number 14. But this is, obviously a little broader of an audience, trying to reach more people to get them to support it. And then number 15, how about Christiana? You want to finish off our workbook here?
Okay, number 15. In paragraph 5, the authors address their audience, which is the 21st century workforce. Which word best describe this group? Flexible, traditional, C, organized, D, loyal. Is it A?
Yeah. This is in 2013, but think about today, right? Where, I'm teaching online because of the pandemic. That shows the flexibility. My wife works from home as well, and that shows a lot of flexibility. 21st century, we are not traditional in the way we work, more so than probably any other time in history, at least in recent history. Organized, that doesn't really speak to that. Loyal, probably not so much, but it definitely shows that we are flexible, especially with a lot of home owned and private or small businesses. Okay, so that is the workbook. I need to follow up with anybody on any other questions here. Got all the answers.